Thought this evening we would do a review of what has been happening in current events and how they relate prophetically to the times in which we live. A little prophetic update, as it were. Not seeking to be comprehensive in any way, um, but just looking at how things are trending since we last did such a study a few months ago. And I think it's very telling. Again, I've noted in previous studies the incredible rapid acceleration of the birth pains, as it were, in their frequency and in intensity, and how there's literally so many things happening in our world that have prophetic consequences. um, that I literally can't even have the time to read all of the articles in the news about them. And I often, and as we will do tonight, actually will primarily just look at the headlines of what's happened in the past, say, 3 months of the summer. Since June, I think, is the last time we looked at what the headlines were. And the Pope we just had just gotten an American Pope, and the things that were happening related to that was one of the last things that we saw in our last update study. Um,
Brother Craig, I would like to go get Deidre if you don't mind and see what's holding her up. I think
okay,
this is an important study for her to hear, so I do want to do that, okay?
sure, no problem.
Okay, I'll be back.
No worries. So again, at this point, I can't even. There's so many news headlines in just the past 3 months that, and it itself isn't a comprehensive list. Just some of the ones that I've happened across and took the time to bookmark. There's literally hundreds of possible things that we could look at, and I can't even open them all. There'd be so many tabs open, it would crash my computer. Um, and that is just looking at the mainstream news source headlines, is what we're going to look at tonight. That's not including what's going on in the church, in the religious news. That doesn't include what's going on in social media. This is just mainstream, largely news sources of what's going on in our world. So we can start here that it says here from CNN, another whistleblower claims that a top DOJ, that's Department of Justice official, suggested the department could ignore court orders. That's from July 2025. So there are those in the current administration, and there are ones in the media who are noting these statements, who are suggesting that the traditional balance between the branches of government and the balance of powers is being can be shifted, and there is a consolidation of power in the executive branch, even more than has happened in recent decades. And we saw in our previous review of what was happening since the Sixth Trumpet began to blow antitypically back in February of this year, how Trump has been presenting himself in his new administration as one who has extraordinary presidential powers because of the emergency situation that our country is facing, and that he's presented pictures of himself as a king, as one who is also a priest, and now as one who doesn't have to listen to the other branches of government, such as the courts, if they disagree with him. He hasn't necessarily gone ahead and done that in a widespread way, but there's suggestions by high-level officials that this is a course that our country might start going down. Um, here from the Daily Mail, we have a headline about another increasing trend is the around things from space or UFOs or unidentified mysterious objects and so forth. Um, and the whole Project Bluebeam from all the way back as far back as at least the 1960s, where there were these efforts by shadowy figures in our government and in think tanks that were coming up with ideas about how can we psychologically unite the world to be together as one unit. Of course, they ultimately want to unite the world in Satan is working to unite the world in rebellion against God, but they can't openly do that, and so Satan is using deceptive ideas. Of course, they use things like the threat of nuclear attack during the Cold War was one of the means that they sought to do that, but did not really achieve very successfully. And the idea of climate change, we'll see, is another trend that is related to that. And then this idea of things coming from space or aliens landing and so forth in contact with other life from other planets as a way that would unite our world together, either harmoniously with these beings as they're coming, or perhaps if they're seen as a threat, then uniting the world in to protect us from these space invaders, as it were. This was the psychological reasoning by very sophisticated people, actually, who were behind some of these ideas. And we can see how they continue to trend in the media today. So here's one from the Daily Mail. Scientists give chilling update on the mysterious interstellar object racing through our solar system. And they warn it's even bigger than we thought.
But Brother Craig, I saw this also um, on the internet. I'm sure you did too.
Yes.
And
They
they,
go ahead.
uh, no, go ahead, please.
So no, yeah, there are a variety of different avenues that this, psyop, as it were, is being presented to the people. There's the mysterious orb lights that appear places, especially it seems over military bases, and particularly military bases connected to chemical and biological weapons. Um, and that they seem to have attributes, otherworldly attributes that defy physics and as we
Yeah,
understand it, and
yeah.
there's high-level quote whistleblowers within the government that are now exposing these things and so forth. All of this is, I think, very controlled uh, propaganda in the media to deceive people.
So
Um,
you don't think this is any kind of outer space life?
Well, I think it's definitely life from other planets. It's demons and in some cases possibly angels, but mostly demons deceiving people. And yes, the demons aren't from this planet. They were banished to this planet, but they're not from this planet, and they are alive. So they are life from another planet. I mean, but it's not something new. They've been here all along. It's
Yeah, but
interesting.
they can't be living. They can't be living on other planets in physical form. I mean, these demonic forces we know are spiritual creatures living in
Yes.
the spirit realm.
And it's interesting, there are even some who are coming to that realization. People like even like Tucker Carlson recently has come to the conclusion that these manifestations are actually spiritual beings that have been among us all along. and that what they're
Hmm.
saying about them is a deception. But there are many people, especially people who don't know their Bible, don't study their Bible, which is almost everybody, and people who are caught up in the media and in the movies about these things, who are very open to the idea that there is contact being made by, quote, life from other planets, that's such as aliens. And again, this is going to be used as a means of seeking to try to unite the world, but not on the basis of truth.
Right, because the other, as we know, the other worlds are living under God's dominion, and why would they want to have? They wouldn't have contact with us.
That's right. We're actually quarantined. We're contaminated.
Yes.
We've been infected, and we've been quarantined from the rest of the universe. They're actually they can see what's going on here, but they don't actually need to come here to see what's going on here.
Did you know that that bubble was discovered? Did I? And as a matter of fact, I think I sent you the video of that. They are actually seeing that we are in this solar system is inside of a very large bubble.
Hmm, interesting. Yes,
Yes,
there's all kinds of things being so. So I'm just pointing out that this is one media narrative that is getting it actually is getting a lot of coverage in the media. That's just one particular article that I noted. Um, Here is an article from the Washington Post, headline, Trump administration to allow federal workers to talk religion at work. So the Trump administration has issued an executive order that it's okay to essentially to proselytize at work religiously, and to, it's fine to keep a Bible or some other type of religious text, like on your desk at work as a way to open up conversations about religion at work. All these things.
that can work in our favor, brother. That
Yeah,
can work in our
there you
favor.
go. So that's actually something we shouldn't necessarily be opposed to, and yet
Right.
we also again can see whither the river is tending. We know that,
Yes.
and so at the same time, there's a balance there. We
Yeah,
know that
exactly.
this is going to end up being abused, but for now, that's actually, I agree, is also it's an opportunity uh, for us in this brief window before it turns in a more negative direction.
Right.
Uh, there's a second article from govexec.com on the same topic. Trump administration reminds federal employees they can proselytize in the office. Um, Here's another article from the New York Times, how conservative Christians cracked a 70-year-old law, speaking about, um, I think, essentially the Johnson Amendment, that would, about being able to speak at church about politics and about specific political candidates, and how they've done away with that Johnson Amendment. Uh, Here's an article from the Wall Street Journal. The Trump administration sees emergencies everywhere. Judges are considering whether to rein him in or not. So the mainstream media is seeing and understands that the Trump administration is claiming emergencies at an unprecedented rate. And now the basic idea has been going on again for decades. All of the modern presidents have claimed emergencies and used that to justify doing things that were either unconstitutional or extra constitutional. Um, but this is escalated to a whole new level now with the Trump administration. And then there's becoming friction with the other branches of government, in this case, the judiciary, over whether to allow him to do that. And actually, in many cases, the courts are actually, especially the higher courts, the Supreme Court, is giving broad leeway for the president to exercise tremendous power over this huge government he's now in charge of. Um, Interestingly, here, David Brody, who's a prominent political commentator on X, formerly Twitter, says Speaker Mike Johnson tells me that the big, beautiful bill is on the correct side of morality. What we did in the big, beautiful bill is exactly along the moral standards and something we're proud to do. It comports with common sense and morality. So, very interesting that the Speaker of the House, who himself is a very prominent evangelical Christian, very outspoken in his faith, is using these terms to describe government legislation as being that there's a direct and conscious effort being made to influence the quote morality of our public legislation. Whether the fact that it is really is moral or not is a whole nother question, but I'm just noting how it's being presented and how they're thinking about what they're doing. Uh,
Brother,
Interesting.
have you seen in the interviews with Christian nationalist Douglas Wilson?
Yes, I
Um,
have.
it's very frightening, isn't it, brother? What
We
he's
see,
saying.
yeah, we see where the mindset's going. Again, I mentioned why you stepped off to try to get Deirdre that. Tonight, I was just looking only at media headlines from mostly mainstream media sources.
Yeah.
Um, and I wasn't even looking at things like social media. I wasn't looking at things that have been happening in the church, all that happened at the GC, all that's happening in the religious press. I mean, there's so much more that we could look at, and even here, I'm just looking at a sampling of
Hmm.
what's been happening in the mainstream media sources in the past, 3 months of the summer.
Yeah.
And really almost 2 months. This is really mostly just July and August, and a little bit of the end of June and a little bit of the beginning of September maybe squeezed in there. And all these are all rapid fire things that are happening, like 10 and 20 headlines a day that I'm looking at saying, wow, look at how fast things are happening. And other people are noticing. Again, Sister White writes about how, as we approach the final crisis, that there will be this incredible general sense among people that we're on the verge of something stupendous, but they don't understand what it is. And you can see how that's happening right before our eyes. Um, Here's an article from Yahoo.com to see how America unraveled. Go back 5 years, which of course is the time frame since COVID. Um, So people in the media are commenting on the idea that America is unraveling. And we saw that was one of the things prophetically that we've been looking for a long time. And of course, how, especially here in the time of the Sixth Trumpet, we're looking for this idea that there's going to be this death and resurrection of the third part of Satan's kingdom, the false prophet, the beast out of the earth. And so many headlines comport very closely with this idea. Here, Trump shocks with, this is from the Daily Mail, Trump shocks with threat that he could take over sanctuary cities and arrest unruly mayors under martial law. Whatever anybody's political thoughts are about the idea of sanctuary cities for illegal immigrants and mayors who don't follow federal law on immigration, uh, it is it is a little alarming to see the federal government threatening to come in and simply just take over cities and arrest the mayor if they don't like him, what he's doing politically. Um, Even ones who think such things should be done should be alarmed about how such power could be used by somebody else who was doing something that they didn't agree with. So these are movements towards martial law, um, more openly. In many ways, we've actually been under military government for a very long time. That's actually why most of the flags that you see flying in America actually have a gold fringe around the flag, or perhaps they have a golden tassel or an eagle flying on the top of the flag, all of which are military symbols, symbols of a military flag, not of the flag of the United States government. And there are actually there's civil government during peacetime, and then there's military government, and then there's martial law. And military government is actually an intermediate stage. And a military government is, for instance, like when the Allied forces conquered Japan and Germany during World War II, at the end of World War II, we installed a military government over the conquered territory of Japan and Germany. And for quite some time, until we transitioned back to civilian government, they were under military government. It wasn't full-blown martial law, but it was a government imposed by and run by and administered by the military. And that's actually what's been happening in America for a very long time. We're actually no longer under a civilian government. We're actually under a military government, which actually implies that we've somehow been conquered by our own government, um, that they're not fully honoring our constitutional rights. But we see that the threats to move from military government all the way to outright martial law are openly being spoken about at the highest levels of government and in the press. Here from the Mirror, Sam Altman, who is one of the very high-level tech bros, as it were, the PayPal mafia. Sam Altman's doomsday bunker confession as OpenAI CEO fears bombs dropping. So there's many different, there's a whole thread as well in the media about very wealthy people building bomb shelters and bunkers to prepare for something, some doomsday-like event or apocalyptic event that seems to be imminent on the horizon.
Hmm.
One wonders how much they're planning these things, and that's why they're worried about them. They can see how their system is really much weaker than they present it to be, and it's on the verge of collapse. And they see their tactics of using division to try to control people through fear. They worry about that learning to a backlash against the elite. And so there's all these ideas of the rich building their bunkers. But of course, the scriptures tell us about how they will hide themselves in the caves and in the dens of the earth. And that's exactly what they're doing. And literally in our day, they're literally building bunkers in the rocks, um, thinking that somehow that's going to save themselves, which of course is a righteousness by works mindset. Here's an interesting article from Pope Leo. The 14th gets a rock star welcome from young Catholics at a huge vigil. That's from The Guardian. And so they had this youth rally, and which they did the same thing with previous popes like Francis and John Paul II, where to try to make them seem popular and accepted, they have these youth rallies and they get the popular entertainers and so forth to come and massage their image, that the whole world might wonder after the beast. Here, another article. This is from early August. Trump's domestic use of military set to get worse, a leak memo shows. So Trump has started to use the military domestically. He called up the National Guard in Los Angeles, and now we'll see, he's had the military takeover of DC, which I think I have an article about here as well. And he's threatening other cities, typically Democratic sanctuary cities for now. But he's establishing the precedent that the United States military can be used on U.S. soil against U.S. citizens,
Mm.
and they can just come in, basically quarantine and barricade around a certain area, a city or a state or whatever territory, and just take it over by at the end of a barrel of a gun, as it were, or a tank. And this is a worrying scenario of what's really going on in our country. I didn't mention at the Trump's earlier. We saw them. Speaker Johnson mentioned Trump's big beautiful bill. That big beautiful bill, of course, having $175 billion for the Customs and Border Protection and the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Division, ICE. Nearly 50 billion of which, at a minimum, was to be used just in the next year to build out essentially concentration camps and develop an entire domestic army of armed gunmen who can come in and pick up any citizen that they want in any way, usually with masked gunmen in broad daylight or in the middle of the night, and take you away, and you just won't be seen again.
Mm.
And that is a fully funded program that has more money available to it than the Russian army currently has to fight the war in Ukraine. I wonder how many people they're really planning to round up. It seems like millions, apparently. Um, Trump is firing officials who are issuing labor job reports that he doesn't agree with. This is an article from the New York Times. I don't know the details of the report and why, but it is the issue that I would have with an article like this is that the fact that our labor statistics and economic statistics from the government, uh, it's implied that somehow that they were really valid until recently when Trump started doing things like this, which is absurd. They've actually been giving us fake numbers for a very, very long time. They're just more subtle about it than Trump is. Isn't subtle, um, and so he's more open in his willingness to fudge the numbers if he doesn't like them. Um, but the idea that the numbers up until this point were really true and good economic numbers is actually not true. They for many decades have been redefining the unemployment numbers and the inflation statistics, using statistics to basically make things seem how they want them to seem, much more than they really are. Here's another article from Newsweek. It's the worst time to be an American farmer in decades. Of course, we're looking among one of the signs of the end. We've got famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places, and wars and rumors of wars. And the one that really has not hit hard yet among those so far is, of course, famine. And yet we've seen in previous updates how it seems like it's almost being efforts to engineer a famine by the land use restrictions and the regulatory influence on our farmers and the push to contaminate and poison all the land through the farming practices of modern agriculture. It's a very worrying trend. Uh,
And you know what else, too, brother?
yes,
The our honeybees are being attacked by a
absolutely.
virus.
Yes.
That's very worrisome to me. That really bugs me because we need the honeybees for for the fruits and for everything,
They,
that
they,
needs to
they,
be pollinated.
that's right. Pollination is a very serious issue, and there's colony collapse is a very serious issue among the bees,
Yeah.
and is becoming dramatic. And I think it's much more than just a virus, or not to say even the pesticides and the chemicals at a minimum contributing to that issue, if not really being the primary cause that's damaging their immune systems and making
And
them
making them
making them more
vulnerable. Yeah.
susceptible to disease
Yeah.
themselves. So
Yeah.
yes, and it has all kinds of issues. It messes with their ability to navigate, and they can't find their way back to the hive, and there's all
Mm.
kinds of problems that are coming out. And yes, that's a very serious issue. And of course, that's one of the ways God blesses the land. One of the ways the land can be cursed because of our sin.
And these militant roundup tactics that no doubt are going to be used to round up people in the days when the Sunday law is being enacted. I think that I really believe that.
Oh,
Um,
I believe that all of these tactics that are being used against the illegal immigrants, which we don't support having come to the country illegally. We're not lawless people. You know, we can have sympathy for these people. They have difficult lives and why they wanted to come to America. But we also have laws, and every nation in the world has laws about immigration and try to enter illegally into Russia or into China or into some other countries in this world, and you'll see what harsh treatment is like compared to how we treat people who come to our country illegally. But the rhetoric also coming from Trump at the same time is over the top and
Mhm.
describing them all as murderers and rapists when yes, I'm sure there are murderers and rapists among them, but there's also many decent people among them who are just trying to want to have a new life and do what's right, but they also shouldn't come here illegally. And of course, the whole illegal immigration issue has been fomented and allowed to happen. Of course, the vast number, 90% or more of all the illegal immigrants who've come to this country in the past several decades have been from South America and Central America and are almost all Catholics. So it's dramatically shifted our country politically. And I believe that's the reason why the problem is never solved, because it's literally led to tens of millions of Catholics being allowed into our country.
I know, but I don't want to see these military tactics being used to.
Now they're using that to having allowed the problem to fester, and they're now using that to justify the military tactics which are being used against these people. And it's all just practice about how they're going to use those tactics against Bible believing Christians very soon.
Yeah, I know,
All
but by
these
that time
all these
they're going to.
detention centers that they're building, those are for us, brothers and sisters.
Uh,
They're not
yeah,
for the
but
immigrants, they're for us.
I know, but they're going to develop them even further, and they're going to develop. They're going to fine tune it,
That's
everything, the
right.
system,
They're
and
beta
hone it.
testing it right now.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
They're
I don't
rolling
want
it
that.
out. It's fully funded. They have the money to do it. These places are being built and will continue to be built. And the jackbooted thugs are being hired and being bribed with brand new cars and $50,000 bonuses to sign up to wear a mask and go out and arrest people off the streets of America. Um, and all in the name of law and order right now, but that will shift very soon. This is just the excuse
Yeah,
to roll it out. That's we see that. That's the next article right here from CBS. Kristi Noem, the head of Homeland Security here, says Alligator Alcatraz to be a model for ICE state-run detention centers. So they themselves are saying what they're doing is a model for how they can scale up. And that's what they intend to do. And they've got all the money. The big, beautiful bill provided the billions, the tens of billions of dollars to roll this out at scale immediately, not in the future. tens of billions of dollars is a lot of money. That's with a B, not with an M. Tens of billions, and that will get a lot done to make this ready to go. And they obviously think that this is needed right now because we know prophetically other things are happening. So the wars and rumors of war thread, of course, continues to be agitated in the media as well, especially here in the British press. Russia moves nuke bombers closer to Europe just days after the explosive Trump World War III row. So there's rhetoric heating up between Russia and Trump and over Ukraine, and Trump gave a 50-day deadline for things to be worked out. Of course, that deadline has now come and passed already. And there are dramatic moves of nuclear bombers on both sides in shows of force. Here's an article in the kind of deceptive, dispensational interpretation of prophecy thread of the media. You see here from an Israeli news site, I-24 News, Ben Gvir joined by thousands for prayer at the Temple Mount. So all this agitation of the conflict, the clash of civilizations between Jews and Christians and Muslims in the Middle East continues to be agitated in a very serious way to deceive people. And the whole movement to want to build the third temple there and all the deceptions of the dispensational ideas are all being seemingly coming to pass. The evangelicals can think that God is working for them. Very interesting there. Here's an article from MSN. The Fed say Smartmatic bribed Venezuela's top election official with luxury home.
Mm.
So one of the top electronic voting machine companies and the one that actually makes all the software for all of the electronic voting machines, I believe, Smartmatic, was originally designed by the CIA to fix elections in Venezuela. And now here is a mainstream news article about how there was also bribery of top election officials to get them to adopt this election software that had backdoors by which the CIA could fix the elections. And then we then brought those voting machines here to America, but we're somehow to believe that they took out that functionality for the machines here. Yeah. Here's an article from thehill.com. Governor Abbott of Texas directs the arrest of the Texas Democrats. He was trying to do, they were trying to do redistricting in Texas to basically kind of gerrymander certain districts to be more favorable to more likely elect Republicans rather than Democrats. And they need a quorum of lawmakers to do that. And so all of the Texas Democrats fled the state to prevent them from being able to have a quorum to do that. But there is a law in Texas that says that they can't just do that. They can't neglect their duty to be lawmakers because they don't like what's happening in the democratic process. And so the governor actually has ordered the arrest of these Democrats. And there's a whole kind of constitutional crisis there in Texas over this issue. Just showing how our constitutional republic and the principles that have held us together for 250 years is disintegrating at many different levels. Another article, Texas issues arrest warrants for Democrats who fled the state to avoid district votes, from the Telegraph. Here's a very interesting article from Reason.com, how the elite changed its mind on Christianity. And I looked a little bit at this article. We won't take the time to go into it, but it's basically how for decades, the elite has really been largely seen as anti-Christian, rebellious, very secular in its mindset. But there's a thread within powerful elite circles in which many people are now openly professing their Christianity. A very interesting development. Yeah, we can pass on that article. Constitution sections on due process and foreign gifts just vanished from Congress's website. That's interesting. They said that this was somehow just a computer glitch, but for a certain number of hours or days, there were key sections of the Constitution related to due process and foreign gifts that from the official congressional website that has the Constitution there for people to know what our government was founded as and what the highest law of the land is, those sections just, oops, disappeared and weren't there anymore. Um, very curious. Um, the Library of Congress blames a coding error for the missing sections of the Constitution. Interesting coding error. The coding error in quotes, even by in this article by MSN, or at least highlighted by MSN. Interesting here, Tulsi Gabbard, who's the director of Homeland Security, goes full X-Files with new conspiracy theory, and she's a Hindu, and she does in this article and in this interview give her personal opinion that she thinks there's, quote, other life out there. So this whole, again, idea of the aliens and the contact with other worlds and how that will affect our world. She's right on board in promoting those things, and maybe that's her true beliefs. I mean, but we know that she's deceived that is, or she's at least contributing to the psyop. We don't know. This is going back to early August, where Trump started putting more federal officers on the DC streets before he took over the whole city, which we'll get to. Here's an article that there's an unusual increase in military aircraft flights between California and Arizona. There's this whole idea of also becoming very much more prominent now in the current Trump administration of an even greater synthesis and fusion between big government and big business. And the government is actually taking even stock interests in companies. And that's actually one of the main definitions of fascism is the combination of big government and big business. It's actually called state capitalism, is another word for fascism. And here we have Amazon Web Services gives the Trump administration a $1 billion coupon. Yeah, we'll just give you $1 billion. You know, maybe you won't, be so hard in our company and investigate us so closely. So the government, big government and big business working together in very interesting ways that traditionally wouldn't have been considered appropriate in a free capitalist society that we used to, based on Protestant principles that we were founded as. Interesting here, Mel Gibson is working on a two-part follow-up to his original Passion of the Christ movie on the resurrection. And of course, Mel Gibson is a very prominent Catholic and Knight of Malta. And his depiction in the Passion of the Christ of the suffering of Christ and how gory it was and kind of glorified the violence of it. And now he's preparing a very powerful, I'm sure, cinematic expose here of the resurrection of Christ. That will be a two-part movie, and it's due within the next couple of years. So we see how the mindset of the media, and they're already planning how to depict these things in a way that is, I'm sure, not in harmony with Scripture. Here's an article from the AP News on all the ways that Trump is delivering, quote, delivering for conservative Christians. Um, Again, we're looking at one of the main things as we're looking at the prophetic updates, especially as they relate to developments of the sixth trumpet and antitype. And we said one of those main things was that, again, that the fire coming down from heaven would involve the seeming death and resurrection of a third part of the kingdom. We saw that as the United States government itself, being that beast that rises up out of the earth, that second witness that needs to seem to get a more wound and be healed. And one of the ways that that's happening is that the traditional boundaries of constitutional limitations are being broken down. And the union of church and state is the way for the union of church and state is being opened up. And this articles like this are showing that that's the very thing that's actually happening right now. And that this isn't just happenstance, but this has been planned. We've seen from our prophetic studies these past several years that these things are planned. The Moment of Truth Summit, which was the end of the first pattern of 7 from the Pope's visit in 2015 to the summer of 2022, we saw the Moment of Truth Summit is where the conservative political party with all levels, federal, state, and local level, all came together with the 7 mountain dominionist evangelicals preaching a prophetic message that they had to, quote, take back the government for Jesus. And they pledged that they were going to take back the government for Jesus at that meeting. It was literally the very last day, the 20th day of that original 7-year period. They themselves called it the Moment of Truth Summit, and they declared that they would never stop until they took back the government for Jesus. And now those people are now the people who are in charge of the government at the state, local, and federal level. And they're doing it. They're doing exactly what they said they would do if you're actually paying attention. And it's coming to pass precisely on time prophetically. Interesting developments in the media, mocking Trump, but bringing in images, of course, caricature images of Satan and all kinds of strange things and of heaven. Deceiving the people with Babylonish confusion. Threats again with the wars and rumors of wars from the express.com. China's threatening to have a tech kill switch, talking about its EMP capabilities. That's one thing I don't think will ever really happen. I think the technology is too powerful a tool of deception for them to ever really take it away. Even though God, of course, is using it for good and to accelerate the finishing of the work, Satan is using it to blind the millions and the billions. There's talks of peace, rumors of peace and safety, all going forth. And we know what follows soon after. U.S. and Russia plan truce deal to cement Putin's gains in Ukraine here. Putin needles U.S. by giving Trump envoy an award meant for CIA official whose son died fighting for Russia. So there's all kinds of strange geopolitical developments amid these wars and rumors of wars. There is Trump's efforts to take back political control over the Federal Reserve is very interesting. I don't support the quote independence of the Federal Reserve, since it's not actually a government institution at all. It's actually a consortium of private banks that control our monetary supply and profit from our system of a debt-based monetary system, and don't have our best interests at heart. So I don't have a problem with the economy being under political control, but we know that that's not going to go well as in the end as well, because it's not based on right principles. But this effort really is interesting as we think about the idea that one of the final steps in order to bring in the mark of the beast system is there has to be a universal system of financial controls. And the political system is moving in many ways to make that come to pass before our very eyes. Here's an interesting article straight from the Wall Street Journal itself. The U.S. marches towards state capitalism with American characteristics. So again, you could phrase that headline, the U.S. marches towards fascism with American characteristics, because that's what state capitalism is. Here's some articles beginning on Trump's takeover of the District of Columbia. Now, on one level, you know, for much of the history of America, the District of Columbia did not have any local representation. They were run by the federal government. It was considered like a little mini federal protectorate. It wasn't a state, and it still isn't a state. But in the 1970s, through an act of Congress, there was some local representation given to the District of Columbia, and now Trump is basically taking that back and federalizing it. So on one level, that's not as concerning as any other city in America, but we see that Trump isn't satisfied with taking over DC, and that he, in pushing the National Guard and even the straight up Marines, U.S. Marines, into some of these larger cities to deal with their crime problems is a very worrying development. That the U.S. military was never supposed to be used on U.S. soil against U.S. citizens, but that's exactly what's happening right before our eyes, which again is a clear indicator that the government that we used to think of as the U.S. government no longer exists. It has been killed, that such things could possibly even happen.
Brother, I've had a long day, so I might just be crazy, but isn't that sort of the same thing as Rome? Rome is its own sort of little country itself.
Well, yeah, the Vatican
Yes,
and actually it's called the Square Mile in London
right. That's its own little
and
country.
DC are they're called city states.
Right,
They aren't they are a power unto themselves.
exactly.
Yes. It used to be the Queen, now the King of England. Once a year, they have a parade in the Square Mile of London, and the mayor is up on a podium, and it used to be the Queen used to curtsy to the mayor, showing that
Hmm.
he's above her.
Hmm.
in that square mile, because it's actually in any other part of England, he would have had to have bowed to her. But in the
Hmm.
square mile, she has to curtsy to him because he's actually the one in charge of that territory, not her. Um, and it's the same with DC. DC is not one of our 50 states that make up our country. It's its own thing. And
Hmm.
of course, it's very occulted. I mean, it was carved out of part of Virginia and Maryland. And so it's the Virgin Mary when you put them together, and that's the founding of our capital of our country. So there were occultists working from the beginning to try to corrupt things. Um, so here, and of course, the left has suddenly become very concerned about these things. And when Biden was doing, nearly as bad of things during his administration and using executive orders by the hundreds, you wouldn't hear a peep from the left. But now that Trump is doing it, they're very alarmed by it. So here's articles from the Atlantic here, the president's police state. And some of it's valid. I mean, we are moving towards a police state, but these things aren't new, and they're a little disingenuous that they only care about it when it's someone that they don't like in power. But the perception ultimately is correct in the trend of where we're headed. Defense One, this is like a defense publication of defense contractors, how Trump's DC takeover could supercharge surveillance, as if surveillance isn't already supercharged, but somehow we're moving even more towards that here in America. The Pentagon, that's the Department of Defense, are actually, interestingly, I don't even think I have an article marked here for that, but Trump actually recently said he wants to now go back to calling it the Department of War instead of the Department of Defense. Very interesting, especially for someone who said he was going to get us out of all wars. He wants to call his Department of Defense the Department of War. But here, the Pentagon plan would create military, quote, reaction force for civil unrest. And again, that's speaking about domestic civil unrest, which again the military was never supposed to be used on U.S. soil against U.S. citizens. Yet these things are now, that idea essentially has been set aside. Evangelical Christian leaders who support Trump owe Bill Clinton an apology. Don't know the details of that. I just found it interesting. Um, Here, Dogs of War from Barron's. China toots its killer robot, quote, wolves. So they're developing these robotic uh, attack robots in different forms, like animals, to hunt people. This is where we're headed. Russian and Chinese navies practice destroying enemy, quote, enemy submarine days after Trump's moves. So again, this is in that line of the wars, of rumors of wars. Of course, the conflict between the great powers, especially US, Russia, and China, this is the most alarming of all of the many things that are going on in this world. Um, Trump makes bizarre arm gesture after saying he'll put nukes on the White House roof, and he looked like he was almost doing like a Hitler Sig Heil. This is from the Mirror. I don't know if they just caught him in a picture while he was gesturing that made it look like that. I'm not sure about that, but the very fact that he says that he wants to put nukes on the roof of the White House is interesting at a minimum. Um, Here's an interesting article from the Telegraph that says Melania Trump has been shaping Trump's foreign policy for longer than we realize. Of course, the First Lady is a devout Catholic. Um, There's another article from the Atlantic on the economy and the tariffs and those consequences. Won't get into the details of that. Here's one of the articles on Trump officially sending the National Guard to D.C. to federalize it. He's seeking long-term extension of that federal control of D.C. Now, rumors of a chikungunya virus sparking China pandemic fears. So now there's rumors about potential new pandemics. We've seen how much power that they were able to attain, the governments of the world, through the fear of the last pandemic, and I'm sure they intend to take advantage of that fear-based power again, no doubt. U.S. and Russia propose West Bank-style occupation of Ukraine. Donald Trump to present minerals deal to Vladimir Putin in Alaska. So they're talking about carving up Ukraine and exploiting its resources. 3 red states to deploy National Guard troops to D.C. under Trump's order. So he's getting people to go along with his federalization here and exercise of almost dictatorial power in certain situations. This was just a kind of interesting psyop that a Russian soldier put a Russian flag on one side of his tank, and he put an American flag on the other side of his tank as he was going into battle against Ukraine. Very interesting. Suggesting that Trump was now on Putin's side and not for Ukraine. Article right after that from the Irish Times. The idea that the Kremlin has compromise on Trump seems increasingly plausible, suggesting somehow that the reason why Trump is so friendly towards Russia and Putin is because they have some compromising information against Trump. Well, not impossible. I don't personally think that's the reason why he supports the Kremlin. He's just much more politically aligned in his thinking with how they think as well. Not to mention that ultimately it's the papal power that's behind the machinations of these geopolitics. We see from the Wall Street Journal, Blackwater's Eric Prince is muscling back into the mercenary business. He was really, for a time, became kind of pushed out and became seemingly radioactive to work with him, but now somehow he's getting back in the business. Big business of being mercenary contractors to governments, including ours. Here's a very interesting article from, of all sources, CNN. An atheist began caring for the dying. Their stories of deathbed visions changed his view of faith. So here's an article that has much spiritualistic deception about what happens when you die and how that can even take an atheist to, quote, start having, quote, faith, even though this is a deceptive faith, if you actually get into the article. It's not a true faith in the true God. Here's Inside the ICE Recruitment Blitz, $50,000 signing bonuses, student loan forgiveness, no age caps. They'll give you a new Dodge Charger, whatever it takes. Just sign up if you're willing to put on a mask and body armor and go round up other Americans at the point of a gun. They've got the money. The big, beautiful bill paid for it all. It's your money at work. Here's an article from theguardian.com, how Pete Hegseth's zeal to bring religiosity to the Pentagon is dividing the military, supposedly. I don't know how much it's dividing the military, but there's a concerted, coordinated effort to bring quote, religiosity into all branches of the government, and in a special way here in the Department of Defense, or now I guess the Department of War. Interesting here from the Mirror that Florida hits record execution pace as date set for man who slaughtered wife's parents and sister. So there's a increasing willingness on the part of states and governments to go all the way to the death penalty. Very interesting as we think about a coming death decree. The Palantir Mafia behind Silicon Valley's hardest startups from the Wall Street Journal. This is getting into the whole PayPal, Palantir Mafia, as it were, Peter Thiel and these types of people, Sam Altman, Elon Musk. These were all early tech investors who became billionaires and now have played instrumental roles working with the intelligence agencies to create a surveillance state. Palantir actually is the name of the crystal orbs in the Lord of the Rings that enabled you to see the future, supposedly. This is the name of the company that they is using to mop up all of our data and create profiles on us. Here's an interesting article of how they're trying to massage Emmanuel Macron's perception in the media, making him seem cool. Macron it plays a very interesting role in the trying to unite Europe in this one world government idea that's going on in these end times. Interesting article here suggesting that Donald Trump is setting Zelensky up to fail after Putin's manipulation. All these articles you need to take with a grain of salt. There's all kinds of propaganda and psyops going on, but the wars and the rumors of wars continue. Here on the other side, European leaders, including Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron, to join Zelensky in Washington for Trump summit after U.S. President's Alaska showdown. So Trump supposedly whispered, "I'll help you," to Putin right before the meeting. Very interesting. Hot mic moment. Here from the Wall Street Journal, more National Guard soldiers to head to D.C. and to prepare to carry weapons. So arms U.S. soldiers on the streets of America. I know people, a friend of mine sent me a picture yesterday. They were in downtown D.C. heading into their office while they were armed U.S. soldiers with heavy weaponry standing out front of his building. And I told them how much safer I feel already. Trump administration announces new private health tracking system with big tech's help. Very disturbing development, supposedly in the name of getting new insights using big data to help us be healthier. They're wanting to go through all of your health information, and I'm sure that will be sold and used against us like everything else. Here's interesting. Newsmax had to settle a lawsuit with Dominion Voting Systems over Trump's election, quote, Trump's election lies. This is the same Dominion that uses that Smartmatic software that was used to fix the elections in Venezuela, but somehow they can sue everybody in America and you can't, and they seem to win because the system is fixed in their favor. Because you're not allowed to talk about those things here in America. It's, quote, classified. So that's the problem with secrecy. Washington Post report shows states, including Arizona, will see vastly expanded ICE detention. They're getting ready to round everybody up. SoftBank invests $2 billion in Intel as Trump administration weighs taking a 10% stake in the chip maker. That's in the Wall Street Journal. They actually did take a 10%. So the government itself, the US government, took a 10% stake in Intel, the
Hmm.
biggest chip companies in the world. The government isn't supposed to own the big businesses. That's not capitalism. It's a form of socialism. It's actually against state capitalism or fascism. And they actually did take that 10% stake. They insisted on it. Very interesting. Uh, Interesting article here. 80 years of Animal Farm. Why we keep reading Orwell. It was an interesting article I recommend. Uh, Here's an interesting article from Mediate. Not, quote, not acceptable. GOP representative is ripped for suggesting Trump get, quote, permanent power as long as he wants, quote.
Hmm.
So literally, these things are kind of being, message ballooned out there into the minds of people. Someone gets up there and suggests, "Oh, let's just let him do whatever he wants for as long as he wants to fix things." The idea that we need a strong man to set things right is really being uh, put out there. Insider blows the lid on explosive cover-up scandal plaguing top secret military bases across America. That's about the mysterious orbs appearing at all the military bases. Um,
Didn't they have that like years ago? Same sort of things going on like 20 years ago. They talked about the same thing.
yeah, it's not necessarily new. It's just more frequent, and I think they put these ideas out there in the past, and now they're bringing them out like they're coming to pass,
Mhm.
and that they really were true or valid. It's really very interesting. I mean, on so many fronts, the deceptions are being put out there. If they don't get you on this one, they'll get you over here on this one.
Hmm.
They've got a deception for everybody, one way or the other. Um, Trump's Intel stake, again, the national security is the new too big to fail. That is from Barron's. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. Uh, I'm off. Yeah, the Treasury Secretary, Intel must give government equity in return for the CHIPS funds. So we insisted on an equity stake in Intel. Uh, Interesting. Here's an article from the Daily NK. From drones to nukes, North Korea pushes AI military modernization plan. So they're back to upping the rhetoric around North Korea again in the wars of rumors of war thread. Hillary Clinton warns SCOTUS, that's the Supreme Court of the United States, will overturn marriage equality, which is gay marriage essentially, um, which is an interesting suggestion by Hillary Clinton. Um, we'll see if that comes to pass. Here's a strange article from the Telegraph. Pope Leo to move in, quote, with flatmates, quote, flatmates in Vatican redesign. I don't know what that means. Um,
Sounds different.
yes, it does. Uh, and here's interesting article from Trump about his sort of seemingly growing religious fervor. Here's an article from Fox and Friends, or about his interview on Fox and Friends from the New York Times. Quote, I want to try and get to heaven. And apparently about how he didn't really think he was going to go to heaven, but he wants to try and to get there. Um, Sounds very righteousness by works mindset to me. But I pray for President Trump. But he seems also to be, again, this idea of him being much more open to religious influences is very interesting. And this whole now military intercession connected to Venezuela is and the supposed drug trafficking coming out of there is very interesting development. Let's get South America involved in these wars of rumors and wars. Trump calls for Fed governor to resign, widening pressure on the central bank. So again, here's this pressure to take over the Federal Reserve. Trump's afterlife fear sparks fresh health concerns as president admits to I'm not, quote, I'm not doing well. It's from the Mirror. He has had some seemingly concerning health developments that we don't have a lot of information about. Here, the new Pope, same as the old popes, he visits a mountaintop Marian shrine. That's a shrine to Mary, to get guidance on where his papacy should go. That's from the National Catholic Reporter. Here's an interesting article. Communists, Islamists, and globalists join forces to destroy U.S. This sounds a lot like some Adventists in their interpretation of Daniel 11 come to a similar conclusion. It's very interesting. Here, an article on how the military is preparing attacks on Mexican cartels. So the willingness of the use of the military in many different roles in many different places all over the world is, and here in America, of course, the overt military budget is pushing close to $1 trillion now a year, plus all this additional funds for taking over DC or for these helping these ICE raids and so forth. This is just a huge amount of our GDP is going to militarize our society. Here's an article pushing the rise of the Latin America's drug cartels, which of course were propped up by the intelligence agencies and ultimately by the Jesuits, and then now they're using that as the excuse that they have to use these military forces to transform our societies. There seems to be an internal struggles going on here. Tulsi Gabbard acts as nearly half of the spy agency staff. An earthquake deep state shakeup. Very interesting. We know the enemy's camp has many divisions and internal rivalries, and they're only agreed on one thing, and that's ultimately in their opposition to Christ. Texas 10 Commandments blocked in 11 school districts. There's this whole push to have the 10 Commandments in schools, to allow prayer in schools, to bring Bibles into schools. As I had in my interview last week with Sister Sheldine, Poetry of Love Media, we talked about the prayer in schools and the Bible in school, and how these are actually things that we shouldn't be overtly opposing, and we should actually be taking advantage of the opportunity to have the truth shared in schools. And yet we also, again, we see whither the trend is tending. We know that ultimately these things are being pushed to break down the barriers and the mindset between church and state. But it also has a evangelistic witnessing opportunity in the meantime. Conservative Christians argue empathy can be a sin. Very interesting. You can be too empathetic and not call sin by its right name, which is actually true. In some sense, I don't know if all their arguments, the way they think about it, is true, but the basic idea is true. Nebraska announced its plan for immigration detention centers, so they're breaking them out all over the country. Sure, they'll have one in every state before long. Russia bombs U.S. factories in one of Ukraine's war's largest attacks. So supposedly they bombed a U.S. factory. It's hard to discern what's true and what's not in the war reporting over there. Trump says Ukraine has no chance of winning war without striking Russia. Interesting. Again, same line of wars and rumors of wars. Trump's civil fraud fine thrown out by the New York Appeals Court. So ever since he's been reelected, the entire tide of legal judgments and media pressure and things that were against him have swung 180 degrees, and he's been getting retribution all over against those who are his perceived enemies. But we can see where that's headed as well. Alex Jones, even Alex Jones is warning about Trump's health problems. How much money is being spent by ICE for these DC operations, and how the Trump administration is a crackdown on U.S. visa holders. So even people with legitimate visas are being scrutinized. It's going much more beyond just illegal immigrants at this point. A photographer's view of ICE's relentless courthouse arrests. So we're having these images all throughout the media on a regular basis. This militarization of our society is normalized. Trump enlists military lawyers to address DC crime. So he's getting the military involved in every way he can. Well, there's still quite a few articles here, more that I haven't gotten to. I might need to do a second night of this. Maybe we'll pause there because it's getting late, and we'll pick it up from there. I've got so many. That's maybe not even half of the headlines that I happen to know. And again, that's just from the past 2 to 3 months. And this is just, 10 or more new headlines every single day at this point almost that have something significant going on in our country about how rapidly things are changing in our society. And it fits perfectly with how we've been talking about prophetically. Any last thoughts, questions, comments? We'll maybe, by God's grace, do part 2 tomorrow night.
Sounds good.
Here, let's pray. Heavenly Father, our most holy Creator God, we thank you so much, dear Lord, that we can turn to you with all things. We know that thou hearest our prayers. We thank you for revealing these things, helping the truth to be made plain, to give us understanding and discernment about the times that we live in. Help us to surrender all to you and to be your witnesses, that you might come soon, that we might be where you are always, never to be separated again, is our prayer. May it be in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.